It's been exactly as advertised. He was going to hit the ground running. He had 4 years of thinking about the possibility of getting back into this position. He made promises along the way. He was much more ready. He came roaring in. Sure, some of it is going to be off-putting because he is reactionary. He is explosive. He is unpredictable. Those were many of the reasons that people aligned with this president.
What you don't do is disappear somebody and then use deportation as a way to crack down on their speech rights. That is just a purely, I don't know how else to put it, but a purely authoritarian move whose intention is to chill any kind of pro-Palestinian advocacy that this administration opposes.
By preventing these situations from ever happening, we actually prevent the negative cascading consequences, and you reduce that incident, but you reduce further down line other retaliatory type crimes.
Those were voices of some of the interesting guests that we have here on the Metro. Listen every day, 10 a.m. to noon, to hear more of those conversations. Welcome back to the show. I'm Robin Vincent. Yesterday, pro-Palestine protesters charged last year at the University of Michigan were celebrating in an Ann Arbor courtroom. That's because Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel dropped all charges against the protesters. They were facing misdemeanor and felony charges for trespassing and resisting and obstructing police. In a statement, Nessel said, quote, "The case has become a lightning rod of contention, and baseless and absurd allegations of bias have only furthered this divide." Now, advocates have doubled down on those allegations of bias. They've argued that Nessel's interest in the case was unusual and that it displayed a double standard. Here's defense attorney Amir Makled addressing protesters and supporters yesterday.
I want to say one thing to everybody here. This is not just a victory for these students today. This is a victory for everybody that believes in the right to free speech. This is a victory that shows that when you stand up for what you believe in this country, today, as we've always said, this was not about trespass. This was not about a felony conduct. This was the criminalization of free speech, and today the state of Michigan agrees that you still have the right to speak up. Today, we want to remember that this is not the end. There are still students across the country that are facing this persecution. There's still a genocide that is happening in Palestine. And we should never forget that today we still get to stand firm and say, "Free Palestine."
Makled recently appeared on the Metro to give us context about the case. Here's the conversation I had with him.
For me, it really hits close to home. I became an attorney because I wanted to serve people who are victims of civil rights violations. And so, in this type of a case, this is really something that I am passionate about. I jumped at the opportunity to help these students, and for me, it's about pushing back on the authorities. They've chosen, the university administration have chosen to criminalize these protests. And it's really selective enforcement, and it's based off of their pro-Palestinian message and their request for divestment from the state of Israel. Divestment is not a new issue with the University of Michigan or many universities nationally, but they're attempting now very, very clear and distinct message that the universities are now sending that we're going to arrest these students and we're going to charge students so that they can now have a chilling effect on, and discourage any future activism by students.
Can you say anything about where the cases are at right now?
Well, right now we're in the preliminary exam stage. We're in the Ann Arbor District Court, and the courts are determining if this case should be sent to trial or dismissed at this preliminary exam stage. Our clients are charged with one count of resisting and opposing a police officer, and that's a felony, and another count of trespass, and that's a misdemeanor. The judge is going to determine if there's enough probable cause to show that this case should go to trial. And it's a really low standard when we're discussing a probable cause standard. It's whether a crime could have been committed and the individual charged with that crime could have been involved in that. It's a low standard, but when we put within that context that there's other violations, that the government has violated free speech, that the government has violated, the First Amendment of these individuals who are charged with crimes, then the court has to decide, am I going to dismiss this case outright? Because the judge in this situation has the choice to make. He can dismiss this case right now at the preliminary exam stage if he believes that charging these students was against their First Amendment rights of political speech and protest. And that's the position of the students in this situation. They were engaged in peaceful demonstrations. They were engaged in a peaceful encampment. There is no allegation of violence or any type of malicious destruction of property in our situation where, university property was destroyed. None of that happened. And with these defendants in our case. So if the government is going to be telling these students that they have to leave the DIAG, it has to be done in a way where it's content neutral. And in this particular case, it's not content neutral because we ask questions of these officers if they've ever broken up a protest on the DIAG, and none of these officers could answer that question and say in recent time or in recent memory or in recent history that we've broken up a protest. It's never happened. So it's our position that it's only being done because of the type of speech that was being displayed, the demand for divestment. And that's the only reason why they broke up that encampment.
Amir, I want to stay on that point very quickly if we could. The officers said they could not remember breaking up another demonstration at this very location at University of Michigan.
Correct.
Do you think that feels hopeful then for this case?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are confident that we're going to be able to acquit our clients. We're confident in the defense that they have.
But then also you're saying, though, that this clearly points to a double standard.
Yes.
Now, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel is pursuing criminal charges against pro-Palestine protesters. She argues these charges have nothing to do with free speech. She says several demonstrators defied orders from law enforcement to vacate the encampment they had created at University of Michigan, and that they physically obstructed the police and pushed against their bodies. What do you say to those claims?
I think that this is a clear showing of selective prosecution by Dana Nessel's office. I'm quite surprised that, Attorney General Nessel, who has been the most progressive Attorney General that Michigan has seen in decades, has chosen to bring this fight to target students and younger generations and activists to discourage them from speaking out. They have created a situation where, based off of the speech alone, and they were engaged in peaceful demonstrations. This was an encampment on the University of Michigan's DIAG. And the DIAG has historically been a place where protests have been held, and it's been a marketplace of ideas for students to engage in debate and activism for years. This is now government coming in and suppressing the type of speech that you have when it's pro-Palestinian. Dana Nessel's office is clear. She's progressive except for Palestine. And in this situation, they want to say that they failed to obey the lawful commands of a police officer. Well, what crime were they committing? What were the lawful commands? Why would they have to leave the DIAG and stop a protest? Just because a protest is happening, that doesn't give government the ability to come in and force them to leave. This encampment was in a position of the university's campus where it didn't disrupt students. It didn't disrupt the ongoing curriculum at the university. It's historically been a place where free expression has occurred. And so for them to come in and say that, well, they failed to obey the orders of police, well, where's your freedom of expression? Where's my right to protest? Doesn't that trump the lawful command of a law enforcement agency, of police? They don't just get the right to come in and break up an encampment because they don't like the content of the speech that's happening.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent. Our guest is Amir Makled. He's a civil rights attorney based in Dearborn who's offering pro bono services to pro-Palestine protesters who are facing criminal charges. Amir, every day attorneys are confronted with questions about justice and morality. When it comes to the pro-Palestine protesters, how does your philosophy as a civil rights attorney, as someone who studies the law, play into this? I mean, you discussed a little bit about what spurred you to become an attorney in the first place. Can you go back to that more?
Well, I mean, growing up as a Arab and Muslim American in the Metro Detroit community, it's something that I've faced discrimination on. And as I matriculated through my undergrad at University of Michigan and then on to law school at Wayne State, it's something that I really felt comfortable with discussing. I always wanted to help those who are marginalized and use my ability to give back in my license to help others who, are going to be facing some sort of discrimination. And when I had the opportunity to represent individuals who are charged with pro-Palestinian activism, I jumped at that opportunity. In my opinion, I think that this is a clear position from the government, from law enforcement locally and nationally, to crack down on political speech involving Palestine. This is a real systemic approach to have a chilling effect on this issue.
The rights of protesters and free speech rights in America more broadly are under attack right now. We're seeing this with the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Palestinian graduate student at Columbia University who led pro-Palestine protests there. Now he's facing deportation. Mahmoud was arrested without due process and detained by ICE for allegedly supporting Hamas. The Trump administration has not produced any evidence to support this claim. And Mahmoud is a legal permanent resident and is married to an American who happens to be 8 months pregnant. What does this case tell you about the current political climate in America and the climate for free speech and dissent?
I think this case, along with the other cases that are happening, are a stress test on the Constitution. And we could have a constitutional crisis in our country as a result of these types of cases. The Trump administration is attempting to punish Mahmoud Khalil based off of his views. And it's really throwing away the First Amendment that protects all political speech, even if it criticizes the United States or it criticizes Israel or other countries. This is First Amendment protected speech. When you're being targeted, when you're being detained, when you're being arrested and taken over 1,000 miles away from your pregnant wife, only for your political speech, is clearly done without justification. Mahmoud Khalil, to my understanding, has no criminal record. He's not a member of Hamas that the government has shown any evidence of doing. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing at all based off of what his protesting was in terms of his protests. He had strong community ties. He's married to an American citizen who's about to give birth. And so really, there's really no reason why he's detained while he's facing deportation, other than the fact that he's pro-Palestinian. He's an activist. And so whether you're a green card holder or a citizen, you're entitled to those same First Amendment protections. And so I think this case is going to really be a stress test on our courts to determine if we still have rights in this country.
Politics feels like a really thorny subject for Arab Americans right now. I mean, you were describing Attorney General Dana Nessel as progressive, except for Palestine. Many Arab Americans in Southeast Michigan didn't vote for former Vice President Kamala Harris because her administration refused to end the war in Gaza. Some voted for Trump instead, and now we're seeing Trump's attitude toward people in Gaza, which has horrified Arab Americans here and Arab people in many other places as well because of his vows to forcibly displace Palestinians. What do you see as the path forward for Arab Americans, the political path forward?
I think the Arab Americans need to continue to engage in the political discussions within our community. I believe that we should not forget Dana Nessel for bringing this type of a case, even though our community supported Dana Nessel's candidacy when she ran. And our community supported Trump. Believe it or not, I think the majority of Arab and Muslim Americans voted for Trump in this last election as a protest to the Biden administration's handling of the war in Gaza. And now we see, with the Trump's plan for a Riviera in Gaza. I mean, it's quite disgusting when he shared that artificial intelligence video of what a Gaza could look like. That really was disgusting and in bad taste. However, we think that as a community moving forward, we have to engage in these discussions. We have to put pressure on our elected officials. We have to continue to go to the ballot box and vote our conscience and keep pushing back as to, so that we can find an end to the violence that is happening in Gaza and in the Middle East. I'm confident that, in time that will happen.
Amir Makled is a civil rights attorney based in Dearborn who's offering pro bono services to pro-Palestine protesters. Amir, thank you so much for joining the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
And we were listening to that conversation because Attorney General Dana Nessel just dropped those charges yesterday. In sports, the Tigers open a 3-game series against the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies have the worst record in Major League Baseball. The Red Wings will have the 13th overall pick in this year's NHL draft. They moved down one spot in the draft lottery after finishing with the 12th worst record in the league this season. Coming up, youth homelessness and housing insecurity are what advocates call a quiet crisis. We'll learn one way to break the silence. This is the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. Stay with us.